Okay, thank you very much. All right, hello to those who are joining us. Sorry we're late today. I have yeah, that's what happens. So I left my phone at home. Okay, what is going on here? The little rubber thing on the bottom it's come loose. Okay, hi Henry, glad you're watching. Sorry for that tumble there. Hey Rhonda. Thanks everyone. Yeah, I can't do this without the phone, and I was out the door and driving away and realized I left it on the charger at home. I wondered why my phone wasn't connecting to my car, because sometimes it doesn't. I thought, I'll deal with that later, and then I went, uh-oh, that's because the phone is not in the car. Well, what a week this has been, my goodness. Charlene took y'all through some of that. It's just great. There was an article in the Dallas Morning News about restaurants losing business because, they were closed for days. And, still so many stoplights out. And just the natural course of my life is I drive through Preston Royal a lot. And that's just been a disaster. And I know Sherry Brooks Allen got her son, your grandson, got T-boned by someone who didn't know how to do a four-way stop. In fact, completely ignored it, it sounds like.
That's the shame of it.
Right? Come on, people. It's not that hard. You wait your turn, one at a time. And if you're behind someone who's about to go, that doesn't mean you get to go too. That's cheating. And
preaching to the choir here.
Nobody likes a cheater. Right? Nobody likes it. Did y'all lose power?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Paul?
Tree, brick, lots of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of damage.
God, so many trees. And I told Charlene, I have not seen so much water on the golf course at Royal Oaks in probably a decade.
By Thursday, it wasn't, they've done stuff to the golf course where it goes down very, very quickly.
Yeah, I noticed that.
It's in good shape. Well, they're not back on it yet.
Well, it was a lake. Yeah, and the soccer fields across the street, just you could have taken a boat out on them. Yeah, it was that deep. So White Rock Creek really backed up, because I'm sure the lake was backed up as well. Anyone live or go by the spillway? I bet it was like going nutso over there. Catherine, did you have damage?
Oh, well, we had trees down.
Yeah.
Fortunately, somebody on our block has a chainsaw and was able to clear the trees. How about you?
Trees down all around us.
Yeah.
We have two big trees in our yard, one in the front, one in the back. They're fine. But across the street at Pam Haley's house, Spencer and Dwayne, what they have a ginormous tree that's the first third of it just split off and came over and took out both mailboxes and missed Spencer's car by that much. Just by that much. So thankfully for that. But in the midst of all this, with the our neighborhood looks like a war zone, as yours probably does. Limbs all over the sidewalks and everything. And our next door neighbors with 5 kids parked their car out front. And in the midst of all this, Wednesday night, someone stole their car from the street in front of their house. And the worst part of that is they've got 5 kids and 4 of them are in car seats. And they have to have special car seats to fit 3 across. Some of you understand what I'm saying. $2,000 worth of car seats.
Have they found the creek?
No. And if they do, typically, anyhow, what a week. So, and then last Sunday we weren't here because of power, and golly gee. So some of you may have read, I had an ice cream party Tuesday afternoon in our front yard because, I love Bluebell, and it had been on sale for $5.67 at both Kroger and Tom Thumb because they were competing. And I had stocked up the day before. And by Tuesday evening, about dinner time, I realized this ice cream is melting. What are we going to do? So I hauled it out to the front yard, invited all the neighborhood kids over, and said, eat all the ice cream you want that your parents will let you eat. And they had a field day. They loved it. And most of them said, I want all 5 flavors, please. And I said, do you want it in 1 cup or one at a time? All together, please. Yeah, I don't know. How mint chocolate chip mixes with cookies and cream, I'm not sure. But anyhow, that's my story. You have to, make lemonade sometimes with the lemons that come. Well, 2 weeks ago, when we were here last, in our series on great themes of the Bible, we were talking about worship as a great theme of the Bible. And we didn't even get a third through what I had planned for that day. We started in the Old Testament. And we, as far as I recall, we didn't even get into the Psalms, did we?
No, we didn't.
I don't think we got to the Psalms. Okay. Yeah, so we were dealing with the Israelites and from the beginning of the Bible into, the temple era. And we talked, just as a refresher for y'all, about what is worship, what is liturgy. Liturgy is a Latin word that means the work of the people. Worship is the adoration of something or someone, right? And so we talked about how, and we'll get to this again today, hopefully, in the New Testament, Jesus never asked us to worship him. Doesn't mean we shouldn't, but Jesus never gave a command, when I'm gone, I want you to worship me. Not there, right? Whereas we see in the Old Testament, the natural practice of the worship of God emerging from the earliest biblical passages. And we get to the 10 Commandments. I am the Lord your God. You shall worship me only. Right? So this is where we get the idea of monotheism, right? That is shared by Judaism and Christianity. But worship has taken on a whole new industry in our lifetime. And this is one of the challenges, and I'm jaundiced about this. True confession, you're not surprised. So that just sort of colors everything for me. We talked last week, and this will come up again in a few minutes probably, about people who call themselves worship leaders. I'm going to go lead worship. It becomes a verb, right? I'm going to lead worship, which is usually a singer, right? Now, our grandparents would have said, what? This is a totally new concept out of the contemporary church. It's not evil. It's not bad, but it does place an emphasis on the person on the stage that can be detrimental to the worship of God. Because a lot of folks inadvertently worship the leader more than they worship the Lord. So let's back up. We were going to pick up with the Psalms today. And, this is an easy one in a way, and we could spend a whole lesson in the Psalms because the Psalms are songs that were largely written for worship purposes. And so we could go on and on and on with that. But I'm going to give you 2 examples. And then if you have others you want to talk about, we certainly could do that. I'm sorry, I'm going to give you 3 examples. Psalm 95 is my first example of this. And it says, "O come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. For the Lord is a great God and a great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth. The heights of the mountains are also his. The sea is his, for he made it, the dry land which his hands have formed. O come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture and the sheep of his hand. Oh, today that you would listen to his voice. Do not harden your hearts as at Meribah, as on the day at Massah in the wilderness, when your ancestors tested me and put me to the proof, though they had seen my work. For 40 years I loathed that generation and said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they do not regard my ways. Therefore in my anger I swore, they shall not enter my rest. What a weird psalm. We only quote the first part of it. Right? That second part in children's choir, that goes away. Right? We're only singing that first part over and over and over again, right? Oh, that today you would listen to his voice. And here we get a sense of revivalism, that you would get right with God in this moment, if you would just get right with God. But it begins with this very familiar to us, if you've grown up in church at all, oh, come, let us sing to the Lord, let us make a joyful noise, right? And I joke about children's choirs, but this is a very common verse and multiple songs for children's choirs, as well as for adults. So here, a psalm attributed to King David, whether he actually penned it or not, it's attributed to him, right? That is a call to worship. So we see this from thousands of years ago, right? This is not contemporary. And yet it feels very contemporary to us in a way, and shows us an example of what it meant in ancient Israelite culture to worship the Lord. We recognize these things. We resonate with these. And this is a psalm we could read in, well, the first part of it, first half of it, right, that we would feel very comfortable with today. Then the psalm right after that, Psalm 96, you know this one too. They just sort of run together. It's a medley. That's what it is. Oh, sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, bless his name. Tell of his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is the Lord and greatly to be praised. He is to be revered above all gods. For all the gods of the peoples are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Honor and majesty are before him. Strength and beauty are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of peoples. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in holy splendor. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord is king. The world is firmly established. It shall never be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens be glad, and let the earth rejoice. Let the sea roar, and all that fills it. Let the field exult, and everything in it. Then shall all the trees of the forest sing for joy before the Lord, for he is coming to judge the earth. He will judge the world with righteousness and the peoples with his truth. So here again, to a lesser degree, we see a combination of this idea of a call to worship combined with a call to repentance or right action. And I think if we want to get a true picture of biblical worship, these two psalms are sermons in themselves, really, because they embody the wholeness of this idea. And here's why I think this matters today. Sorry, now's the sermon on this. So much emphasis on worship is on emotion in the moment. Emotion in the moment, with no call to go out different than you came in. It is about feeling good in that moment, or feeling so bad you feel good. Those are similar things, right? And it doesn't have that prophetic call to go and be different in the world. And you cannot deal with the Old Testament without having a prophetic element to it, because all worship in the Old Testament is rooted in the worship of God that has a moral call to do something about it, to be different from everyone else. And I fear that too often what we lose today is that prophetic call because we're so wrapped up in an ecstatic kind of experience, right? An ecstatic experience. And this reminds me of what the Apostle Paul says later to the church that is dealing with speaking in tongues, that he will only allow that if someone can interpret and the word is profitable for the people who are there. It's not about the ecstatic experience, even though that may feel good in the moment, right? And we can come to church and, as John Wesley famously said, our hearts can be strangely warmed, right? But if we're cold by the time we leave the door, is that really worship? Because I think the biblical idea of worship is that it prepares you to go out and do something because of where you've been, right? It's not just enough to, well, as James said, be ye doers of the word and not hearers only. And there are a lot of folks who want to come to church and be hearers only or praisers only, right? And so out of this, the idea of the very word worship, I think, has been twisted often, right? Now, the other thing to think about is with the children of Israel, and then certainly as you have the tabernacle and then you have the temple, that become places where God lives, where you go to have a worship experience. But we also know from the Psalms that we can find worship of God in nature, in creation, and in other places. And some of y'all talked 2 weeks ago about how you feel very worshipful in other settings, whether it's reading a devotional or being in nature or in conversation. There are other places. And I think there is also a danger today in saying you've got to go to a certain kind of setting with a certain kind of leader to have worship, right? So let me pause. Reflections, comments on that? What do you think about these two Psalms, about that idea? Anyone push back, change, agree? You're so rain-soaked you just don't know. Okay.
I think when I first came to Wilshire and Bill James was the minister of music, it was just interesting because I had never thought about clapping after someone performed
Right.
on the platform, because I grew up Methodist, and man, you just did not.
We got sort of clappy around here lately.
Well,
Yeah, yeah,
it's interesting in the 30 years
Yeah.
how it has evolved.
right.
But
Well, we took a quantum leap recently.
Era, we didn't do that.
Yeah, yeah. Melanie?
One thing that impressed me when I first came here, I was, reading everything I could find, and I hope it's still there, but there's a little section about worship and by song. And God didn't necessarily bless me with the most beautiful, and I got a bone to pick on that.
Yeah.
Because I would have been a sacred music person. I would have kept it straight sacred. But I love to sing, and singing as part of worship
Yes.
is just this wonderful thing. And they talk about that in our Wilshire thing, about how that is, they want people to
Right, we want you to sing.
And a couple of weeks ago, I was online and you were talking about the different types of work. Well, maybe I was here, but anyway, the different types of work. The sermon should not be the apex of it.
Right.
And I had never thought about that before, and how important and why those words were in our Wilshire.
Yeah.
That this is as important.
So, yeah, worship is the total experience. It's not just the sermon.
Right.
And for those who weren't here 2 weeks ago, what I said was, too often, particularly in Baptist culture and evangelical culture, everything that happens in worship is a warm-up act for the sermon. I know preachers who think of here's an old-fashioned phrase, the song service. That's an old one. As the prelude to the main event, which is the sermon. Well, I'm sorry. You're going to be hard-pressed in the Bible to find an example of preaching being the heart of worship. Certainly, it is a part of it. But we've made it into the celebrity event, right? And here's Johnny kind of thing, right? And to George's credit, one of the things he tried to do during his tenure here was to try to push back against that, right? And currently, one of the things you've seen happening in the order of service is things have been shifted around a bit, and the sermon is moving a little bit toward the middle of service, right? And there's some things afterward to remind us that it's not just, this is not, you know, the ultimate thing of the service.
That's where I was going.
Yeah. I mean, it's important, right?
Yeah, I realize that doesn't address, you know, the prophetic side of it, but I just thought that was.
Well, it is relevant, right? It is relevant. And, you know, the prophetic side of it can also be expressed in songs that cause us to understand things anew. There's different types of learning, right? I am a musical learner. I can remember songs from my children's choir in 3rd grade, right? But I can't remember phone numbers or, you know, whatever, right? Or remember to bring my phone with me, right? But I could sing the song from 3rd grade children's choir in First Baptist Church of Cushing, Oklahoma, right? God who touches earth with beauty, make me lovely too. First song I ever remember singing in children's choir, right?
That seems kind of like a heavy song for children.
Well, we were advanced children. Clearly.
It's Oklahoma.
Yeah. I was straight out of the Sunday school board, you know.
One thing I love about that scripture you read, that last song,
Yeah.
it talks about the forest singing.
Yes.
That just touched me. I don't know.
Well, there's that other song that, you know, the trees will clap their hands with joy. We've seen that this week. I don't think they were clapping their hands with joy. I think they were clapping their hands in anger on Tuesday. But anyhow.
Well, it seems to me it's interesting that you talk about how in Baptist culture where the emphasis is not on clapping, and of course my culture is completely different
Right.
from that because everybody had an opportunity to worship, and everybody had an opportunity to I mean it was audience participation too, and so that I find that very interesting because when I came here, you're like, you're not supposed to clap. Oh, what's wrong with y'all? You know, it was really interesting. So I think culture has a lot to do with the way we worship as well.
Yeah.
And it is not about the performance. It's not a performance. It's not. It's the very last thing it is. It's praise to God, and that can be interpreted culturally as well.
So, yeah, thank you, Lynette. I'll get to you in a second. This is a great point. And I think comparing the traditional white church to the historic black church is a really interesting exercise here because the black church is a total participatory experience. Even the sermon, we have the call and response, right? You're not just listening, you're letting the preacher know you're listening, right?
And if you don't say something, he's going to tell you, amen, has nobody.
Right? This is a total everybody in experience, and that's really, really important. Yeah.
Some of you may notice that the St. Clair Choir sits for the postlude to hear Jeff play it. But he has asked us, please, do not applaud. Please. I told him the only way he's going to get around that is to not be so good.
Okay.
But I've done this, you know. He does not want, he wants it to be his offering.
Well, now you've picked a bone with me, and I'm not going to get off on this, but I really am strongly opposed to the choir sitting at loft for the postlude.
Really?
Because it restricts choir members from greeting new members and fellowshipping with people in the church. And I know you disagree, Susan.
Well, I'm just going to say that, no, what I think is that we all should sit for the person. That's the way I believe it should be.
Yeah, but it's not our culture to do that.
Well, it could be changed, but.
It could be, right? But here's my point. If the whole congregation's not, why does the choir held captive for that?
We're doing that because we want to.
Well, not everyone wants to.
Well, they can get up and.
Well, no, because they're chastised if they do. Yes. I'm speaking from experience here. Yeah. And so when you have new members who are joining the church, you cannot come down and greet them because you got to stay in the choir loft. When other people are visiting, you can't come mix with them because you're held captive in the choir loft. So my point is, if everyone's going to sit, everyone sit. That's not our culture right now. So I think the choir should not be required to sit and pay obeisance to Jeff, which he doesn't want, as was said here. it looks like a cult of worshiping Jeff. That's my view on it. So, and I know others disagree. I very, very strongly disagree with this, but I can't do anything about it. It's not my call, right? So, yeah, I'm not, that doesn't work out so hot. Yeah. Right. I try not to pick on my own church too much. Right. But I think Susan's point is different churches have different cultures about worship. So Doug Haney used to quote Tip O'Neill, the former Speaker of the House, who said all politics is local. And Doug adapted that to say all worship is local. And this is really true. There are different traditions in different churches. And, I noticed this through the years when we had pastoral residents come through. And they wanted immediately, without ever paying any attention to our culture, they wanted to import the culture of Duke Chapel over here or some other place they had been. And we had to say, whoa, wait a minute. That's not how we do it here. That's fine there. There's nothing wrong with that. You can't just change everything to suit the way you are accustomed to it being, right? And these things are really important. And I know one of the things Timothy has grappled with, and I have not talked to Ariel about this, we've been through a lot of change. We've been through a lot of change. Most of it good, right? But there's still a limit to how much change people can take in anything. And so worship becomes the public symbol of that, right? And so, when you move this or you move that, it may be for the best, but it's still difficult for people to adjust to, right? Yeah. Did I tell you about the Sunday I had a panic attack in worship? No. I've not told you this story?
No, I don't think so.
Well, it was a year ago. It was more than a year ago. It was last year, first Sunday of Lent. And as I've been very transparent with y'all that, my own emotional transition from 17 years here into a new job, it's been emotionally rough for me. And I love what I'm doing. I loved what I did. It's very weird to stay in the church you once led, right? And I have done my best, except for the 5 minutes ago, to be seen and not heard. I am very passionate about that issue. It's hard, but I'm doing my best with it. And it was the first Sunday of Lent, and I walked in the sanctuary, I sat down. It was a weird Sunday. The sanctuary choir wasn't singing, and Allison was sitting beside me. And I was looking around at everything in the sanctuary that I had something to do with. The order of service, the way it's formatted, the paraments, this and that, and all these things. And I was thinking about all that, and I opened the order of service, and something had changed. Big time changed. And it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. Last year during Lent, the order of service changed. There was like a poem at the beginning or something. Again, it was not a big deal. It wasn't bad. But all of a sudden, I was just overcome with this anxiety about change. And I'm a pretty adaptable person. And I began to sweat. And I was like, I cannot stay in this seat. And the service began, and I wrote Allison a note and passed it to her and said, I'm having a panic attack. I've got to leave. I'm okay. And I got up and walked out, and the minute I walked out the narthex doors, I could breathe again. And it took me several weeks to go back to worship. I kept coming and teaching the class, but it took me several weeks to go back to worship because I was so anxious about being anxious, right? And I tell you that story because I think a lot of us bring baggage to church. A lot of us bring baggage to worship, right? And some of it is based upon our expectation of what it ought to be. And we come from different experiences in different places in that. And then when what we've been accustomed to changes, that can be difficult too. Again, it's not evil. It's not bad. 95% of the changes that have happened are really fantastic, right? It's way in the positive column. And so it's not that it's bad, it's that it's different. And particularly when it comes to worship, we get set in our ways about what we think. I'm remembering, this will illustrate this for you, back about a decade or so ago, it might have been more. George walked into worship planning one Monday afternoon and announced that he wanted us to drop the offertory prayer and move to something called prayers for the people. So a decade or more ago, we did not do prayers for the people here. We had an invocation and we had an offertory prayer that was perfunctory dribble. I mean, how many times can you pray for blessing the offering? Right? I mean, it was not great. And in those days, we had a rotation of deacons who were assigned to do the offertory prayer. And so all the deacons got rotated through there. Well, that was very uneven, right? Because some could do an offertory prayer well, some could. Some didn't want to do it, but they had to, right? And I remember sitting in that worship meeting thinking, oh my God, we can't do this. This is never going to be accepted here. And yet we did, and now you don't know anything different, right? Because we love prayers of the people, and I doubt anyone's missed the offertory prayer, even the deacons, right? So change does happen over time, and we have to be adaptable. We have to be adaptable to that. Yes, Joni?
I remember the first Sunday that Timothy preached, and he wasn't in the chair.
In George's chair?
And I mean, the choir came out, and we were all looking at each other like, is he here? And then we looked around and realized, oh, okay. But I mean, it was just this rearranging where people should be and ought to be that just threw some of us.
Yeah.
Like,
It threw us in the congregation.
Right. Well, and this even affects where you sit in the congregation, those of you who are not the choir or on the chancel regularly, right? I'm learning this anew in the last 4 years as I've found my place, usually with Paul and Pedro, in our certain spot over there, right? We have our place, and most people have their place, and I understood that before, but it wasn't the kind of reality it is, because I could look out from the chancel every Sunday, and someone alluded to this in a Facebook post this week. They asked me a question. It was Bob Coleman. George and I had opposite views on this. George was always looking for who was not there, and I was always looking for who was there. So I told him my glass was half full and his was half empty, right? He was looking for who wasn't in their usual spot to know they weren't there that day. And I was looking to see who is here today, right? And so we have different perspectives on all of this, right? It's unsettling when you go visit someone else's church, right? And there's a totally different worship experience than what you're used to. Maybe there's a screen and not a hymnal. Maybe there's genuflecting. Maybe there's kneeling. Maybe there's a whole lot of standing, right? One of my coworkers is Greek Orthodox, and he was telling us on our staff call this past week that the choir that he's in stands through the entire service. They never sit down. And he's having some orthopedic problems. He's trying to figure out if he can stay in the choir because he can't stand up that long. Right, Melanie?
So, this brings up sort of change in general, and I think it's something I struggled with, and I'm sorry if this gets too far afield, but church change has fed into that, and I feel like kind of at our age, our collective ages,
yeah,
sort of.
Watch out.
It's all changed now.
It's all changed. Oh, God, that's great.
Everyone says, good aging is being adaptable and stuff, but, everybody's had enough of that. It's just like.
Yeah, no, exactly right. Trish?
I feel like it's just change for change's sake. Like, what exactly is the reason for this change? So many changes so quickly, you're like, why now?
Yeah.
Is it really necessary to do that? I mean, that's too many for me.
Too many changes. Well, hey, let me just tell you this. Here's the ultimate example of stupid change. The church I grew up in Moore, Oklahoma, the longtime pastor there, who I grew up under, retired. I was in seminary at the time, and some family friends of ours, she was on the pastor search committee, and I was in touch with her still, and they ended up calling a man from somewhere south of Fort Worth, who was super evangelistic and was a complete fool, right? And everyone at Southwestern knew he was a complete fool. I tried to warn them, right? This is how bad things could be, right? I tried to warn them, right? They wouldn't listen, because I'm just a seminary kid who grew up in the church, right? Obviously a liberal, even by then. And yeah, remind me to tell the story about the pastor search committee I chaired one time in Kentucky, and everyone thought I was a conservative. Trying to bring isn't that hysterical? That's another story. This dude was so arrogant. They had recently moved into this giant they built an entirely new facility. Beautiful new sanctuary. This dude comes in on the Saturday night before his first sermon, takes out the brand new pulpit and puts in his special preferred pulpit that's a plexiglass kind of thing, because he will only preach from his pulpit. And I'm like, folks, you should have known there was a problem right then, right? So whatever change we're dealing with, it is minor compared to that, right? And you're right. Worship is where we come together and we have these experiences, but we all bring different attitudes toward it, right? We've just beautifully illustrated that here today with our different perspectives. We ought to do this, we ought to do that, we ought to do this, we ought to do that, right? And part of it becomes custom for us about how we do things here. And anytime you tinker with the Wilshire way, it's what we used to call it, right? The Wilshire way, that's our way of doing things. It's tried and tested, right? But also the reality is times change. And so clapping is an interesting perspective on this, right? Because we purposely, pridefully didn't clap for anything, right? For very good reason. There is a younger generation coming into the church that doesn't know that history and sees it differently. There are people coming into the church from other experiences where they're looking for a church like us, but they've come out of a clapping culture, right? And it is entirely good-hearted, right? There's no one I know who say, oh, I'm going to clap because that was a really great performance, right? But it still is change for us. And the thing about clapping is it only takes a little bit to get it started. It's like a fire. It only takes a spark to get a fire going, right? And a little bit of clapping and people pick it up, right? Same thing happens to the symphony when someone claps between movements and they shouldn't, right? Drives you crazy, right? There's decorum. But just a couple little claps and, oh, yeah, let's clap, right? So, my attitude on that is it's not evil. It is different. It is different for us. It's enthusiasm. And I think in these days, enthusiasm is good for us. It's one of the things we need to know and deal with. But you're right. Change is difficult. And worship is where we're going to feel it the most. Yeah. Now, if I were to come in here next Sunday and we turn the room around and I'm over there instead of over here, some of you would lose your ever-loving minds. Not that I'm planning to do that, right? Yeah. I know. I remember being in elementary or junior high, and sometimes the teacher would reorient the room, right? And you're like, oh my God, where do I sit? Yes, Melanie.
So what I was going to ask is, and I won't put you on the spot right now, but maybe we can talk about this, or I can look it up over the week. But is there some scripture that might be helpful about accepting change and adaptation?
The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our Lord stands forever. That's the one that comes to mind. No, I don't think so. Let's look at it. I cannot think of a single thing other than that.
Jesus was telling, you know,
I mean, the whole message of Jesus is to repent, to change. So the change in the Gospels is about changing from a sinful path to a righteous path, right?
I won't be here always, maybe, and the Spirit will come.
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
So, Mark, I'm just wondering, did Paul ever talk about, say, new cultures coming into the different communities that he wrote to in his epistles, or in his letters?
Well, so yeah, I mean, we have examples of that. The question for y'all at home is, did Paul ever write about new cultures coming in? The book of Acts is all about this, right? And the whole thing with Peter and the sheet of animals, kill and eat. This is about assimilation of cultures, right? It's about Gentiles coming into the Jewish-rooted early church. The writing about glossolalia, speaking in tongues, is certainly on that, because some people were doing that and some weren't. Even the writing that gets so misconstrued, God, now we're off on a rabbit, about women should keep silent in the church, is contextual to a specific time and a specific place with a specific need, right? It is not a universal truth that we've got to abide by today. And so, I know, right? Yeah. I think he said somewhere in there, former associate pastor shall keep silent in the church. That's probably a passage in there. Yeah. I'm going to have to confess my sins today. Anyhow, this is an interesting question. It becomes, I think, a cultural thing when you're bringing people together. Has anyone ever been in a church that merged?
Yes.
Okay, and how did that go?
Pretty well, actually.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was...
The thing I kept thinking is, why did we have to merge into their building? Why didn't they merge into our building?
Okay, yeah.
It's a better building.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But we couldn't talk into it.
Right.
Not everybody went.
Right.
Yeah.
And we eventually left.
So when you merge two cultures, even if they're like Baptists and they're the same thing, right? Your expectations are different. Now, those of us who grew up Southern Baptists in the 50s, 60s, 70s, right? I know some of you in the 40s. Some of you knew Herschel Hobbs personally, I think, right? Okay. I did meet him. Yeah, okay. Yeah, as long as you didn't know Basil Manley, then we're okay. One of the founders of Southern Seminary. So that was 19th century. Okay, I don't think it was that old. There was a time in Southern Baptist culture when you could go from church to church and pretty much know what to expect, right? Because the liturgy, the lessons, everything was out of Nashville, and it had a local flavor to it, right? But it was going to be you would recognize the hymnal, you would recognize the Sunday school curriculum, you would recognize the cover art on the order of service, because it all came out of Nashville, right? The only difference was, were you in a country church or a city church, right? And there were different expressions of that, how that came to be. And that's just not even a reality now at all, right? Oh, I have a funny story to tell you, by the way. Pardon me, this is maybe bad. In the store, I was driving down LBJ the other day, Thursday. I looked over and Watermark, the M has fallen off their sign, and it says Water Ark. I thought, well, that's appropriate to the weather, right?
I think that is prophetic.
In some way, yeah. I don't know about that, right? Okay. Where were we? Yes.
I don't know where we were exactly, but when we were talking about music and song worship and things like that, when I came to Wilshire, this is a drastic change for me.
Yeah.
I had grown up independent Baptist.
Oh my, yeah.
And we sang strictly out of a hymnal, and we sang songs from the past. And I really miss some of those past songs. I mean, we never sing Rescue the Perishing, or Save a Life, or any of those songs from the past. And I really miss those.
Okay, so for those who are not hearing this, Carol Ann grew up independent Baptist. It was a big change for her years ago when she came to Wilshire, but she's talking about how she really misses some of the old hymns, right? So it used to be, every once in a while, we'd throw a hymn sing, you know, where you get to sing those old hymns. And I think about those hymns a lot. I grew up with those as well. Of course, if you think back, a lot of us sang those hymns on Sunday night. Sunday night church is where you sang the blood hymns, right? You know, there's power in the blood, all that stuff, right? They're called the blood hymns. There's a name for the category, right? The old rugged cross, right? Because you could have like a hymn service on a Sunday night when the preacher didn't have a full sermon ready to give because he just hadn't gotten it together, right? It's very easy to pull off a, you know, extended hymn sing out of the hymnal.
They call it a singing.
A singing, okay. Right. Now, here, Carol Ann, here's the thing. I've become so personally aware and concerned about the bad theology in some of our hymns, right, that if you were to give me some scissors, I would probably cut half the hymns out of the hymnal. Or I would take a black marker to several of the verses, you know, that I think are teaching us bad theology, but they're beloved hymns to us, right? And a lot of the blood hymns, sorry y'all, now you pulled my chain again. A lot of the blood hymns, as beloved as they are to us, teach penal substitutionary atonement, which is not a theology we typically, you know, it's God's wrath.
Teach what? What'd you say?
Penal, P-E-N-A-L, not penile, there's a difference. Sorry, okay. I mean, when I was a kid, I misunderstood these words, right? It's like I had a neighbor had to teach me the difference between prostate and prostrate. Two very different words, but they sound a lot alike. And to a fifth grade boy, it's easy to mispronounce them, right? Yeah, I said something about someone falling down prostate. Yeah, prostate. And my neighbor parent nearly lost it, right? My friend's mom. I still remember we were standing across the fence in the backyard, and she helped me understand the difference between those two words. There's a modern song that there's big controversy over this, and I'm down in the weeds here, but it's a song called "In Christ Alone." You've probably heard it, right? There is a line in that hymn song. It's a song that has become, it may even be in our hymnal, I can't remember, that talks about Christ being the substitute or paying to satisfy God's wrath. That's what it says. To satisfy God's wrath. Because the people who wrote it believe in this view, right? And there are some hymnals that will not include that song in the hymn, even though it's very popular because of that line. And there was a big case, I think it was the United Methodist hymnal, I can't recall, I have to go back and read, where they changed the words right there and got in big trouble because it was a copyright violation, right? Right? And so this becomes if you think about worship and how powerful songs are to that, right? Again, we learn our theology from, would you be washed? How does that go? Would you be free of your burden of sin? Power in the blood. Would you be washed in the blood of the Lamb? Would you be made whiter than snow? A little bit racist, maybe, to some people, right? We got in trouble years ago here singing that hymn because someone said, you know what? Not everyone's going to be white when they're washed in the blood. Oh, but it's a biblical concept, right? So how do you deal with that? Here are some of the problems with worship. Okay, I'm going to finish with one last psalm so that next week we can actually get to the New Testament on this. My notes are getting all crumpled up here. Psalm 100, also one of the all-time great hits here, if I can get back into my iPad. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. Know that the Lord is God. It is he that made us, and we are his. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him, bless his name, for the Lord is good, his steadfast love endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. That's classic, right? This is the essence of worship in the Psalms. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come into his presence with singing. I want to end with a comment that goes back to something we talked about last week and something we talked about early today in the lesson. It's a question. Can you have a worship service if there's no preaching? I think so, yes. I know preachers who say you can't. Honest to God, I'm not making this up. Preachers who say, if the spoken word of God is not preached, you do not have a worship service. Now, I've never heard anyone express that who's not a preacher. Right? So maybe figure that out from there, right? Again, what is our expectation? What is our culture? What is our history? You know, what perspective do we bring to this? Charlene?
Our friend Kristen Roberts in Laguna Beach is in a church fully inclusive, progressive on social issues. And last week they sang Holy, 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 I Surrender All, and the doxology.
Okay, hey, Kristen, I'm glad you're joining us. Nice to see you on here today in Southern California. Absolutely. All right. Well, so thus ends the tirade for today with a little bit of lesson thrown in on that. Let's pray together. God, grant us your grace and help us to find you in every place we can today, in the trees, in the wind, in the very essence of life. We pray that you'd bless us and guide us in our worship of you. We pray through Jesus Christ. Amen.
I have one other thing to